All right, who's playing and who's not playing on Sunday?
Crowder's going to be out. Apke's going to be out. Paul Richardson is a giant hold-your-breath scenario. Crowder, I was able to confirm yesterday, and Ian Rappaport report that he is. I mean, first of all, we saw him on a scooter in rolling around the facility. So that was sign one. Like, hey, probably not going to play this weekend. But I was able to confirm that at this point it's more week to week than it is day to day with him. So, there's a chance that maybe next week they take a look at it, that he's progressing. But at this point, I'm guessing it's a couple of weeks before Jameson's back. So you got Harris now lining up in the slot and practicing in the slot full time. Beyond that, I think for Apke, I mean, look, I don't think we talk enough about the fact that, like, we have a fourth-round pick that just hasn't done anything.
Yeah, it's been a tough year.
A fourth-round pick is not nothing.
What do you mean? They got a couple of them. Samaje P. Ryan.
But what is it about Troy, particularly? I mean, he was a very good college player. He was very fast.
Yeah. He was someone they thought was going to be really helpful for them on special teams.
Yep.
And they could develop long-term at safety, but he had a hamstring
injury.
Not
getting it, or what?
Well, he was terrible in camp. Like, he's not a good NFL football player right now. So I think that's part of it, too, is the expectations for him were so low that nobody seems to care. But then he had the hamstring injury, came back on the first day back, re-injured it, and Gruden even said this week, well, if I'd known he was going to re-injure it, I would have just – frankly – him on IR anyway. He's not going to help you this year at all. Even when he comes back, he's going to be inactive. Kenny Ladler's a better player and has been really good on special teams for them, and he's the one they called up. So I think at this point, like, lost season for Apke, get him healthy, and I guess the one upside to keep him on the active roster is you can practice him and he can start to get better towards the future, and hopefully it's not a total waste of a pick. It's just a slow developing type thing. Paul Richardson's the big one, though. I think that for him, his knee gets a little bit better every week and then gets a lot worse on Sundays when he plays on it. And I fear that he's not going to during the week, and he's going to have to sit out at least a week, if not a couple, to get that knee right. Because if he's not able to get up to top-end speed, like, what's the point? Like, Paul's not a one-trick pony. It's not like he just runs straight. He can run a lot on the route tree, but a lot of that stuff is leveraged off the fact, his ability to get open is leveraged off the fact that he scares you getting past you over the top. So if he's not right, that's pretty scary for this receiver core, and you're going to see a lot more of the same thing we saw last week. Now, it worked. You saw Doxson get more involved, but then you also saw a lot of Brian Quick, a lot of Michael Floyd, a lot of Maurice Harris. And we'll see, but it's at this point, it's not just like trying to get through. It's also holding your breath for a couple more weeks, and then hopefully they can activate Trey Quinn and he can get back, because that would be, at this point, a huge boost to their receiving core.
Craig, Ziggy Hood released a few days ago. I guess not a big surprise. Only played 48 snaps so far this season, 37 of those coming in the first 2 games. So Hood no longer on the roster.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by that, just because Ziggy's a guy that's so well respected in that locker room and a guy who is a kind of a veteran presence. But I think what it comes down to is, if you're the guy that you're saying, hey, the reason you're here first and foremost is the fact that you're a leader, but maybe the best leader we have in our locker room is the second-year player we have in your position group, what's the point? And I would also be curious to see how Caleb Brantley's come along, a guy who they signed earlier this season to a little bit of fanfare because he was a former, high draft pick with a ton of upside out of Florida, and that can potentially develop into a really good player in the right system, in the right room. And obviously he's got the best coach in the league at that position in Jim Tomsula. So if all of a sudden they think Brantley's ready, they need the roster spot, and John Allen is turned into this incredible leader, a guy who really gets into guys and when he needs to, he's not super vocal a lot, but he's more of just a tone setter day in and day out. Like, that's the dude who's really even more, it almost feels like more than Trent or Kerrigan or some of the guys that have been around. Like, people look at him and, like, that's the way you want to be a pro. That's what it means. And not that Kerrigan or Trent don't do their work, but I think part of it's the newness too. It's like, oh, this dude's serious. And so his emergence as a leader in that means, since even though that room is so young, and thus they move on from Ziggy and eventually wind up using that that roster spot on J.U. Chesson to give a little depth to the receiver position yesterday.
All right, we've been talking about the passing game, that it's not really firing on all cylinders. Alex and Gruden have been talking about this the last couple of weeks. What can we expect this weekend?
Yeah, it's tough to kind of figure out because there's so many different issues going on, and you just wonder like which one can get fixed and how quickly can they get fixed. And I asked Alex about it too this week, and asked how linear the progression is, and he said it's not. You know, each week is a different challenge. Some weeks it's going to look better. Some weeks you're going to be like, oh man, are these guys ever going to get it? But what you hope is that when you zoom out, it's kind of like, you know, the stock market over time where it dips and climbs, but it climbs. When it climbs, it's more significant than the dips, and so, you know, if you were to take the average and draw a line through the middle, that average would be going up. So for Alex, he's got to get he's got to get his eyes faster, and he's got to get through progressions. And I know this is what Cooley was talking about yesterday, where he kind of locks on, especially Jordan Reed, and so he can't just lock on number one guys. And you know, D'Angelo said this yesterday on Chad's show. If the job was just lock on Jordan Reed and eventually throw him the football, then anybody could play quarterback. The job is to get through the progression and read the defense, and he's not doing a good job right now of A, identifying pre-snap what coverage is, B, working the right side of the field based off of that, and then C, getting through the actual progression after the ball is snapped. And it's hard. It's really, really hard.